Hello and welcome to another Commonwealth Conversation. This is We Virginians. I am Ryan Gilchrist. Joining us today are a couple of members of Virginia's House of Delegates. We're going to be talking elections, specifically elections and the way the coronavirus crisis is affecting the process. Joining us today, we have Delegate Mike Mullin. He's a Democrat representing the 93rd District in Virginia's House of Delegates. The 93rd District encompasses Williamsburg, portions of James City and York counties, and portions of Newport News. Delegate Mullin, welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
And we also have Delegate Glenn Davis. He's a Republican representing the 84th District in Virginia's House of Delegates. The 84th District encompasses a portion of Virginia Beach. Delegate Davis, welcome.
Oh, appreciate you having me, Ryan. Thank you.
And of course, as always, my co-host, Marisa Porto. She's an executive and residence at Hampton University and a longtime newspaper editor and publisher. Hello, Marisa.
Hello, nice to see you all.
So elections are a pressing and relevant topic. What would you like to ask the delegates to get us started today?
Well, we had an election plan for early in May and the governor's postponed it. It's coming up in the next week or so. I'd like to ask you, and we'll start with Delegate Davis. What do you think the turnout will look like? How do you think the coronavirus is going to affect the election?
Well, so I served on city council for 5 years in Virginia Beach. I had the opportunity to run in a May election cycle as well as a November election cycle. And local elections in May are always significantly lower voter turnouts than a November election, even less so than an off-year November election. So I think we're going to have a low turnout, but that's expected even without the coronavirus situation. Given where we are now, I think we're still going to have I would expect a relatively reasonable turnout still. Maybe some of the absentees or mail-ins may be just a little bit higher, but I think this would have been a lot different had it occurred a lot earlier on in the coronavirus situation as opposed to where we are today, closer to the backside.
Delegate Mullin, do you have anything?
So yeah, here in Williamsburg and Newport News, we have sort of an interesting situation that we have a bedroom community where many people have come to retire and to be able to enjoy many of the wonderful things that we have on the peninsula. And so we are now looking at, when I spoke to the registrar in Williamsburg, James City County late last week, we're at almost four times as many mail-in ballots as what we were in 4 years ago. Now, I'm not sure whether or not that increases total turnout, but mail-in ballots are where we're seeing significant increases in local elections right now. I think there's a lot of feeling of wanting to be active in the political process right at this moment, and local elections on the 19th are an opportunity for people to be able to have their voice heard. And so we're seeing significant increases, at least on the mail-in side.
So let's talk a little bit about the mail-ins. I noticed on Twitter the other day, Delegate Cia Price had a YouTube video about how to actually fill in the ballots, what to do to make sure that they were counted. Can you tell me a little bit about, do you feel like there's any confusion out there? Because there sounds like she must have felt like there was a reason for doing the YouTube video. Do you feel like that with so many people who are interested in your area in voting on over mail, do you think there's some kind of question about how to do it?
So the short answer is yes. I absolutely agree with Delegate Price in that regard. Voting by mail in the United States started during the Civil War when Union and Confederate soldiers did not have the opportunity to be able to return to their homes to be able to participate in local elections. And so we've had about 160 years worth of ways of being able to secure the vote via mail. And mail-in voting is one of the most secure ways of being able to participate as a member of the electorate. But in Virginia, we've always historically made that a complicated process. Please don't quote me on the number, but I think it's like 17 different ways in which you can check off the box saying that you are eligible for mail-in voting. Right now, everyone can say that they are 2A, which is just a fancy way of saying that there's a disease outbreak that's going on right now, and that essentially anyone who would like to can vote by mail if they check 2A on the ballot. But that's an easy process. Lots of legislation that was passed this past year to talk about voter registration, talk about, I think Delegate Davis can talk about this a little bit, the controversy surrounding whether or not somebody needs to be an outside signatory for a mail-in ballot. And Virginia has historically been very reticent to embrace mail-in voting. It's something that our armed forces have been doing for 160 years. It's something that we as a population have been doing, but here in the Commonwealth, we're always a little different. We're always a little, I don't want to say slower, but more thoughtful about how we embrace changes in our democratic process.
Delegate Davis, I think, and Delegate Mullin brought it up, there's a part to the mail-in ballot that requires you, and in May will require you to find someone to sign that you have actually signed the ballot in front of them. And then I guess the June ballot will be different. So tell us a little bit about that controversy.
Sure. So right
someone
now,
who had to actually find someone to help me sign that ballot.
was that? Sorry. You had said something just at the end. I didn't get that.
Oh, I said as someone who actually had to find someone to help them sign the ballot, to help to be a signature for the ballot. Tell me what the controversy is.
Sure. So there's a little bit of a controversy on whether you should have to have what we've always had to have on mail-in ballots, which is a witness. It's just someone to say, yes, I saw this person sign it under the threat of perjury. I witnessed this. It's one step more to prevent voter fraud. There's this huge, thought for some reason that we don't have voter fraud via the mail. And a study that shows that the propensity for fraud happens when you're away from the ballot box, that there are numerous situations, even in the Commonwealth of Virginia, where there's been voter fraud via absentee voting. There's been vote buying, but you can only do vote buying when it's actually via mail or absentee basis. And people have gone to jail for this. And whenever you have these conversations, someone always says, well, give me the example. And you give them one. They're not hard to find. You can Google them. And they say, well, that's only one or two. Well, let's keep in mind that the whole House of Delegates and the General Assembly, it was in the ballots over one vote a couple of years ago in the Newport News race with Yancey. So one ballot could have changed the whole dynamic of the Commonwealth of Virginia. So one example, probably there's 100 more that you haven't found out about, but even one changes. And having someone say, yes, I attest that this person has signed. There are reports out there, and I forgot the numbers, and I can pull them, but of people actually having admitted privately to news agencies that they weren't the ones that actually filled in the ballot or even signed the ballot. They've admitted that someone has done it on their behalf. Well, that's not what this country is about. If I can't control the credibility of the ballot box, everything else is in question in this country.
So, yeah. So, given that, and let's stay on that topic because it is sort of at the heart of what we're dealing with at the moment. Because let's be honest, we're all in patch it up mode at the moment. We're still in the middle of a crisis. Everyone is still just trying to make it work. So, obviously, we will learn lessons from this upcoming election. What are your thoughts in terms of both? Looking at the complicated process, maybe not complicated, but certainly less easy than it could be process of obtaining a mail-in ballot. And Delegate Davis, your concerns over potential fraud. What are ways we can look at doing voting in the future if we do continue to have concerns about pulling people together in groups at polls? What are some of the options?
Well, first, Mike and I first agreed both this year. The only part that I ever found confusing on absentee ballots is pick the reason why, right? I mean, that gets to be kind of a little bit crazy, and I've had people ask me that question. So I agree. You shouldn't have to lie to vote absentee, and honestly, I bet you a good population of people go vote absentee, basically lie on that application. when they do it. So because they want to make sure they get that chance to vote. It's very important to them, and they want to make sure they don't miss it if something were to pop up that day of the election. So Mike and I agree on that, and we fixed that. As far as if we were to do, so there's a couple of things that I'm very concerned about. Fraud on the front side, missing ballot on the back side. You can pull the numbers of missing ballots that on an election cycle that go missing. We know they've been mailed out. We know they came back, and there's reports all over there. One thing I'd like to see, and this I've talked about this for years, whether you want to do online, mail, or whatever, is why is it so hard if I were to vote in person or I were to vote by mail, that there's this unique identifier number that when I send it back in, I can go onto a website. It doesn't tell me how I voted. It just says this unique identifier number has been received. And then I know that I've been counted. There are, I think, certain ways that we can help on the fraud on the front side. And we can also make sure that that ballot that I sent back in because I wanted to be recorded was received. And but we're not putting that stuff in place. But I think there's definitely things we can do.
So sort of a two-factor identification setup.
But very close. Let's make sure it's not fraudulent on the front, and let's make sure it got received and counted on the back.
Delegate Mullin, your thoughts there? Obviously, everyone wants to push everything online. What are the concerns you see there, and is there a way to make that reliable?
So Delegate Davis just brought up something that I don't think I had heard of before, at least not here in Virginia. And while he and I might not agree on the policy issues, he's always a very innovative thinker when it comes to uses of technology to be able to solve problems. And so having something like a two-factor authentication that you would have to do like you do for Twitter is that would be something that would be available for voting is an interesting idea that I hadn't thought of. I will say, though, that the concern about voter fraud is vastly overblown here in Virginia. The number of cases of voter fraud prosecution are less than a dozen over the last decade. And almost all of them are from people who are doing something obviously nefarious. Virginia has set up its voting system since the time of George Washington to be able to prevent people from being able to express themselves from the greatest body of the electorate. George Washington himself got in trouble General Assembly we would call treating, where he would bring out a big bottle of whiskey and say anybody who votes for him is the one who gets to be able to drink for free that day in front of the courthouse. Then you come up to the 20th century and you see the history of the Byrd administration, and you start to see some of the history of creating May elections so as to be able to disenfranchise African-American voters and non-landed white voters. We have a long history of being able to create barriers to voting under the premises that people are not being properly educated in their vote, or that they are not, that there is a potential for fraud as a way of creating barriers to disadvantaged communities being able to participate in the ballot box. And so I think we're in an interesting time to be able to try different opportunities and different innovative ideas, like what Delegate Davis was saying. That's an interesting idea. I don't know the premise about how that would work, but it sounds interesting. But the idea that we should lock down the opportunity to execute your most important constitutional right because of the possibility that, 15 out of 7.6 million are going to be bad actors is, I think, not advantageous for the system as a whole.
Well, it sounds like you all have some potential discussions to have about identification and authentication and moving forward. Let's get on another topic. I guess I wonder, and you brought it up, Delegate Mullin, which is disparities in elections and voting. And we seem to know now that that COVID is disproportionately affecting health-wise African Americans and Hispanics in particular. And so I wonder, and since you brought it up, what do you expect from those and other minority populations as we move into the election season? And we can start with Delegate Mullin and move to Delegate Davis.
So I think you've hit on an uncomfortable reality of Virginia politics, which is that African American participation in off-year elections or in May elections is historically much less so than older Caucasian participation, and that's just a reality of the numbers that we see here in Newport News, which is a city of 100 and correct me if I'm wrong, 182,000 people. See municipal elections in which the total vote count is 5,000. Bananas. And that system is rigged in that way. How COVID will change that is interesting. I don't know. I think we are going to start to see an acceleration towards remote participation, whether that's vote by mail or whether that's some sort of technological solution. And I would imagine that if we find ourselves in an extended phase one, as the governor has suggested, just that we could see participation moving upwards, but in non-traditional fashions, like voting by mail or technological opportunities for voting.
Delegate Davis, perhaps you could talk a little bit about this topic, but also about if someone is going to the ballot box on election day, what safety measures will be in place for that person to actually participate in a comfortable way?
Well, I mean, honestly, we can do it the same way we do for our ABC stores that we decided don't have to close, right? You wipe down the equipment every day or after every hour of the day. People come in with masks on. You keep the social distancing. I think that, I mean, this is something easily done, and we've seen it done, and the government's seen it done, like I said, with ABC stores. So I don't think it's that difficult at all. I think Delegate Mullin is right. We're going to see some changes this year. I think we are going to see maybe a little bit more of a mail-in, but I think that's because, so you can't wait till today and realize, okay, we're at the tail end of this, I'll go vote in person. If you want to make sure you could do this, not knowing what the future held, you may have asked for your mail-in absentee ballot, weeks ago, right? So I think because of the situation we were in prior, we're going to see more absentees and more mail-ins. My concern is how we assess the impact on different communities, not recognizing all the variables in play. I'll give you an example, Norfolk. Norfolk is a large minority population, large city. I do not believe, and maybe there's one council person that actually has an opponent this year, but I thought I'd heard that no council member has an opponent. So you're going to have a significantly reduced turnout in that election, overwhelmingly minority based, that aren't going to come out because there's no contentious races, right? So my concern is looking at this and saying what communities are disproportionately impacted, not taking into account all the variables that really come into play. Another thing, local elections sometimes in May do disenfranchise in general certain communities because they don't feel like they have a say, that they have the voice, that someone represents them. And that's something that I can't speak necessarily now, but we worked very hard when I was on Virginia Beach City Council to overcome. And that's why we created the first majority minority district when we redistricted back in 2010, was to address that. So there's a number of reasons why minority population when it comes to voting is down. And that's something that I think localities have to work on absent this whole COVID situation.
And pardon me for a moment, can I just...
Sure.
So here in Newport News, up until the most recent redistricting that occurred because of Golden Bethune Hill, the Supreme Court case, we had 11 split precincts, any community in Virginia. So that had precincts where you were voting in different precincts based solely upon where you were responding to. That's difficult to be able to participate in the election process. When we were looking at the election process for this May election, what we found is that there are 5 precincts in the city that have to be moved because there is not sufficient social distancing space, and that there is not the volume of volunteers capable of being able to participate in the process to run a proper voting precinct. And much of the reason for that is because historically, people who help out in the voting precincts are usually a little older and more vulnerable. So there's a great expense that the city of Newport News is putting on to be able to move places and to hire people who would have otherwise been volunteers, because this is not an easy process. And people are going to have to vote in significant places like Riverside for the first time in a totally different place than where they've ever voted in the last 20 elections. And, you know, I understand that this is going to be difficult and that we have to participate this way, but it is going to be hard.
Mhm. Well, it should be certainly an interesting time for us. I would like to ask one question, which is kind of an odd question, but so if you were a politician and you're running for office right now, how is COVID changing how you campaign?
It is amazing. So I have some very good friends that, I mean, they run campaigns, and I love marketing myself, and that's part of what I do for a career. And this really has kind of changed that dynamics that we've never seen before. You can't go out and knock on doors. You can't do that that personal one-on-one anymore. So how do you get that interaction? And I think we're going to see, and we have seen, a lot more online. We've seen a lot more of that interaction, trying to create that personal environment. And I think in many cases, it's very good, because I think more so now than ever, people want to vote for someone that is authentic. They don't necessarily, no one wants to vote for the guy that is who the consultant made them out to be. And on a TV commercial, you know, stand up on stage, you can kind of get that. But to see a Mike or a me in our home with our family, answering questions, hitting that one-on-one, I think that's a better way to politic, a better way to campaign. That's how they're having to do it now. And we'll see the outcome of it. But there's a lot more reliance on virtual interaction, social media, Facebook Lives than I think there ever has been before.
One,
So
Mike?
that come mid-June, we're going to start to see the financial reports from all of the local elections. But I would imagine it's going to be the first time in Virginia history in which the majority of local election spending by candidates is done online instead of mail or on retail knocking on doors. And I think that's going to be a pretty big change.
one last question, and that is, and this one is for either one of you, but what long-term public policy issues do you think we will see come out of the COVID-19 pandemic as it pertains to elections in Virginia?
Great question. Mike, want to go first?
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
So I think that we are going to accelerate the process of remote voting, and that whether that's vote by mail, which is probably the most secure way of being able to vote remotely, versus a technological approach like Delegate Davis is suggesting, which is, I'm sure, the long-term future. But I think the immediate future is probably be that we're going to see no excuse absentee ballots start July 1st. We're going to start to see universal mail-in ballots coming next year, like what we just saw in California, and a couple of other states, including, I believe, Florida, that are testing those out right now. So I think the move towards remote voter participation is only going to accelerate.
Delegate Davis?
I think Delegate Mullins is right. We're going to see a quicker movement towards some type of remote voting. You know, finally, we're going to see more technology in education, which God knows we've been trying to do virtual learning forever and push back and push back. Now I think people finally realize you can't push back anymore. We're going to see it in more industries, and we're going to see it when it comes to voting opportunities. I just hope that we keep the fraud piece in place. You know, I'm not going to disagree with Mike that fraud is overwhelming and rampant and is 50% of the votes cast, and we all know that's not the case. But one's too many, 10's too many. especially when one makes a difference in the balance of a full Commonwealth. So how do we put this in place? So hopefully it's not a rush to expand the status quo, which we know that there's fraud and there's cases out there, but it's how can we do it responsibly in a safe manner and protect that ballot box still, that integrity of the ballot box that we hold so dear. So I hope that's where the focus is. If we can get that, then we can move forward with the implementation of it. But we have to get that piece in first.
Well, it sounds like there might be some opportunity for the two of you to work together in the next session. So,
Well,
thank
we've
you.
heard quite a bit, and I love to reflect on a number of things. So.
I wanted to take the time to thank you both for coming today, for sharing your insights into the election process, and really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you for all of those who are watching. We appreciate it. If you've made it this far in the video, we sure would appreciate if you'd give us a like. And if you'd like to subscribe, we have many more of these that we've done already and that are coming. If you do have questions about elections, please be sure and search for the Virginia Board of Elections page. Just type Virginia Board of Elections into whatever search engine you use. It'll get you right there, and hopefully you can get your questions answered there. Again, thank you, Delegate Mulligan, Delegate Davis. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.